Thank you for coming back here and listening to more of my story. I really appreciate you. And I really appreciate you because you've taken time to appreciate yourself. That's what this podcast is all about. Basically teaching you to appreciate yourself and the value that comes through that. It's such an important thing to know and to be taught. And it's an interesting world that we live in where we're not taught these things. You know, school teaches us how to be an employee. And that's a fact. So to be a good human and to be the person you want, generally you got to kind of figure that out on your own. There is no manual for life, but there is if we listen and we share with each other and we grow through each other's experiences and we apply them in our lives in whatever manner we see fit. And for me, along my journey, I learned so much about what it means to pretend, about what it means to live without a lack of love for myself, for others. And I came through the other side of that because I took some time and I processed emotions and I looked at my life in the present moment versus the past or the future. And I no longer played victim or blamed anyone for anything that happened along my journey. The responsibility was mine. And I was okay with that because I was ready to forgive. And it was through that I was able to be the person I wanted to be in the present moment. It sounds like a lot to go through, especially, you know, when you look at my journey of 23 years of compounding emotional traumas and living a life where I didn't process any emotions. And I was just stuck in the repetitive cycle of the emotion. That seems like a lot to break free from that and figure out who I am in the present moment. But you know what? It was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me because it was like I took off the bag of rocks that had weighed me down for such a long time in my life. In a moment, I decided to take that off. But the beautiful thing about what I did was when I took it off, I left it off. Letting go for me was an actuality. I decided I was going to be somebody different in the present moment, so everything that happened to me in my past did not define me in that present moment. So it was a beautiful thing. What a weight to take off yourself, you know, when you're ready to do that. And if you're here and you're listening to this, I would like to encourage you to do that because it's a very real thing. And you know, the beautiful things about the stuff that I talk about is there's no one to rely on but yourself. That's a key piece of information for life when you're trying to grow and you're trying to evolve into somebody, into a person you want to be or something you want to be. That's all on you. And I was never really much for team sports when I was a kid. I didn't really understand the idea of relying on a whole bunch of other people because I was so in tune with who I was and what I could do. So for me, the idea of team sports didn't really work out. But, you know, snowboarding and skateboarding and driving motorcycles and riding four-wheelers, those kind of things are an independent sport. And I was really good at those kind of things. And I was really good at them because I only had to rely on myself, which I can see now was such a benefit for my evolution in life because I believed in myself many times throughout my life, just in the capability of the things that I was able to do. I knew that if I dissected something and looked at it from multiple angles that I would be able to figure it out, and I would practice it until I got good at it. I was just generally something I did, which is probably why I was always a really good drug addict, is because I practiced that behavior. And I was really good at beating myself up, and I was really good at distracting from processing my emotional traumas. I got really, really good at that. And I got really good at lying, and I got really good at making excuses as to why I couldn't do things. And when I say I got really good at lying, I mean I got really good at lying to myself. Because let's be real, everything happens on the inside before it happens on the outside, right? And when you look at a journey of evolution into the person you want to be, living in the present moment, all of this begins on the inside. And for a lot of people, that's very difficult to come up to that realization and that acceptance to begin that journey simply because we don't know where to begin. That's why I've shared some of the experiences that I've went through in these podcasts, in the earlier episodes of these podcasts. But something that we all can associate with is processing emotions or the inability to process emotions. And when I was in jail, no one told me how to process emotions. No one taught me that. I had come to a point in my life where the door to my freedom in the external world was taken away from me, which was in some way a gift, because it removed me from the external distraction of the world, so I was able to look inside myself, because that door that I had locked for quite some time inside my mind was about to be open, because I had the key and I was willing to unlock it, because I was so tired of hiding from it. I was so tired of distracting to go through that door. I was willing to open it. Well, I wasn't afraid anymore. I mean, I think fear is a big thing of why we don't go on the internal journey, is because we're afraid. We're afraid to discover who we are. We're afraid to look at our past. We're afraid to face the things that we have buried for quite some time, because for some reason, holding on to that pain for quite some time is a lot easier than facing it for a short amount of time, right? Short-term pain for long-term gain. I'd understood the long-term pain long enough. I was so tired of reliving the same emotional traumas and the same emotions over and over: guilt, shame, resentment, regret, anger, frustration. I'd come to understand those emotions very, very well, so well that I practiced them every day that they became normal to me. They were detrimental to my growth, absolutely, but they were normal because I was comfortable in the understanding of what those emotions are and what they were doing to me. Because the emotion inside of a emotional trauma is what happens to you. But the lesson inside of the emotional trauma is what happens for you. And that's a really great understanding to think about when you're ready to process emotions. The emotion we understand. Everybody can feel. We get this. The feeling is difficult for us to process, which is why we distract from it. So if you have felt fear, anxiety, stress, regret, shame, guilt, resentment, remorse, these things, you understand it. So what we must do after we feel something is we must detach from the feeling so we're able to learn from the experience. Because everything that happens to us is happening for us. So we have to learn as to why that happened for us, whatever experience we went through, what was inside of that experience that can happen for us, because there's always a lesson inside of something. We just have to be willing to look at it and find it. And the biggest part is apply it, because a lesson not learned will be repeated. But that's the truth. Detaching from the emotion may sound difficult, but when you're looking for the lesson, it becomes very beautiful. Because there's something to learn inside of there, and then you get to apply that for the rest of your journey into other situations, because life's difficult. It just is. This is why we learn. This is how we learn. And it's only as difficult as we make it. I made my life so difficult for 23 years. It was incredible. I mean, being homeless for quite some time and being a heavy drug addict that had you face many adversities in life, no money, no food, no shelter, like taking away all your basic needs because your distraction from your emotions was so heavy. You learned some very difficult things along that journey. I think about it now, being outside in the cold, being hungry. I did that for so long. But I moved through it. I taught myself how to grow through the emotions. And a big part of processing emotions for me came through forgiveness. When I was ready to sit down and I was ready to learn something, like, we have to be able to move through that emotion. And how do we move through that emotion? It's just so much easier to stay angry or stay frustrated or to stay sad or to blame someone or play the victim. But it doesn't really get us anywhere, because we understand what it means to stay inside of that emotion. We understand those emotions so well. So for me, I knew I had to forgive. It was just a reality. I had to forgive. And that's not something we've been taught how to do. But I can tell you from experience, when I looked at everything I had done to everyone, and I'd looked at everything that everyone had done to me, it already happened. So when we're dealing with processing emotions, the experience has already happened. So it's in the past, right? Because we're left with the feeling, which is in the present moment. So for me, I knew I had to let that go. And to let that go, I had to forgive. That was the only way I could take the backpack off. The backpack of rocks that was holding me in one place, just all that weight, that dense energy I've been carrying around for so long, all those unprocessed emotions. In order to take that off and let it go, I had to forgive. And it was a wonderful part of the evolution, because the liberation of what was holding me back for quite some time was just so beautiful. Was it difficult? Only as difficult as I made it. You know, I'd already stayed inside of the repetitive cycle of the emotion for 23 years that I knew that didn't serve me any purpose other than to keep me in one place and not allow me to grow. So if I just forgave myself and I forgave everyone for what they did to me and for what I did to them, let's see what happens with that. And you know, the most beautiful part about forgiveness was it was an acceptance and an understanding that happened internally within me. And it wasn't something I had to revisit. It let go because it was over. Forgiveness is such a beautiful thing because you're able to move past something. Because you've came to an understanding within yourself. You've actually made peace with something. That's what forgiveness is you're making peace. It's only as difficult as we make it, but it'll be a tool in your evolution to have. Forgiveness is a wonderful tool to use in life. It's a very powerful tool. It has you see perspective. It has you become accountable and responsible for things in your life that generally we want to lay blame or play the victim within. It alleviates you from those two things. And the alleviation of victimization or laying blame is so beautiful because there's just no more repetitive cycle. A loop of feeling and blame and constant psychological behaviors. You know what I'm saying? You know when we repeat things over and over and over and over in our mind, or we want to blame someone, or we want to play the victim. We just replay actions over and over and over in our mind, and it doesn't get us anywhere. You know, we create conversations that we would say this, or I will say that next time, you know, that just hypotheticals and assumptions that don't serve the evolution any purpose. You're free from that when you forgive. And I know that that's really important because creating hypotheticals and assumptions in our mind about scenarios that haven't even happened, it's a really bad psychological behavior to create. It's normal, that's why we do it, but it's one to become aware of because it doesn't actually serve any purpose at all. Like creating hypotheticals and assumptions in our minds, you know, there's no validity to it. Living in the present moment is everything. It really is. It's a beautiful thing to live in the present moment and to understand that, what that is. Not having your thought process go to the past or to the future, just literally allowing everything to be in the moment. Because like everything that you can affect is in the present moment. The future hasn't happened and the past already happened. So we just look to the past as lessons and experiences. That's all it's there for. Right? We're being caught up in an emotion from the past doesn't serve any purpose in the present moment. It doesn't. You know, if you want to feel something in the moment, for sure, feel something in the moment. But as life goes on, detach from that emotion and look at what that experience did for you, right? What can I learn from that in the present moment now that I'm observing this experience in this point of time? Because a lot of people take things with them for quite some time. I mean, for example, my kids. When I lost my kids due to my drug addiction, I blamed the mothers for that. It wasn't the mother's fault that I was using drugs all the time and my life had become unmanageable. I was a good father. I was a really good father. But there's an example for you. I lost my kids. And I was a really good father. But I was a drug addict. And that's the truth. And I beat myself up for that for so long. I just used that as an excuse as to why I should crawl deeper into my addiction. Rather than just processing everything in the moment as to why I was using drugs and looking at my life for all the things I had done to myself and to becoming accountable and responsible for the things that I was or wasn't doing. I blamed everyone else for that. And it was difficult for me to look at that from a different perspective. But you know what? I had to. Because for so long, I just played the victim. I played the victim in a scenario that I was completely guilty of. But we trick ourselves because it's easier to lay blame or play the victim. It's easier. It just allows us to become comfortable with whatever scenario we've created in our mind, rather than becoming honest and authentic and accountable, responsible for our role in the experience or the emotional trauma that's happened. We just lay blame or play the victim. And that's normal. That's something we've been taught to do. Processing emotions and being honest and speaking our truth is not something we've been taught to do, and that's not really the result of any fault of our parents. If we look back further as to why we do that, it's because they were never taught to do that either. I mean, if we look at the generation our parents came from, children were to be seen and not heard. So there definitely was no communication going on about feelings. If anything, they were creating mass amounts of emotional trauma, putting children to work at a very young age, growing up in a home with many, many siblings because there was no money because of the war, right? Then these are the people that grew up and who had no idea how to parent in a situation where there's love. There was just the need to make money, to grow, to have material items, not really to talk about feelings or communicate about important things, about processing emotions or what we want to be in life or how we're feeling. Like, these things just weren't happening. So then our parents are brought up in a generation where, materialism becomes everything. Success is defined by monetary gain. This is what shows other people that you're successful, that you've made it in life. When in reality, we're sitting here today and the demand for processing emotions and communicating about emotions and communicating to ourselves and speaking our truths is so high because of the result of generations not doing this. So what we're doing here is very important, and having conversations about this is very important, but not blaming somebody and becoming aware of why we are where we are is a wonderful place to be. And that's why I look back to things, because I have to be accountable and responsible. It's my journey. But then I want to understand my parents, and I want to understand my grandparents, and I want to understand, how we all arrived. Like, why in my family did we not talk about emotions? Because that's really my whole addiction, and everything started at a very young age because I couldn't communicate how I felt to my family. I had a lot of emotions going on. As human beings, we're highly empathetic. So with myself personally, I felt things very, very deeply when I was a young child. Happiness was the result of tears, Sadness was the result of tears. Anger and frustration was the result of tears. But I never spoke about these things because in my family, we never communicated about emotions. Now, it wasn't my parents' fault. I had to understand why we didn't do that. So I looked as to the way they were raised. And then I could learn about what happened to them. Because for a long time, I did want to blame everyone and play the victim as to why nobody was listening or paying attention to me. But really, at the end of the day, when I was 12 years old, I should have communicated how I was feeling. And I didn't do that just because I was taught not how to do that, right? But that's not the result of anyone's fault but my own. You got to be there. You've got to be honest and authentic when you're willing to process an emotion through an experience. The choices I made to use drugs because I distracted from not being able to communicate how I felt, those were my choices. That's not anyone else's fault. That's my own fault. And I practiced that behavior, so I got really, really good at it. And I eventually stopped going to school, and I eventually stopped going to work, and I eventually stopped caring about my family, and I eventually stopped caring about myself because I was practicing a behavior. And this is the result of what happens when we don't process emotions. We get really good at distracting in other ways. For some people, that's eating or shopping or drugs or whatever it may be. These things, these distractions are the result of not processing emotions. We lie to ourselves because we don't want to speak our truths, and then we distract from feeling the emotion because the emotion has us feel something so deeply that we don't know what to do with it. But again, when I was in jail, I just decided I was going to feel everything and allow it to be. I surfaced everything all at once. I brought it all up. I mean, maybe you don't want to do that, but that's how I did it, just because it had already happened. So I looked at everything that had already happened, and I just thought, like, okay, here I am today. I have nothing. But finally I have myself. And who am I? Who am I in this present moment? I decided I wanted to be honest and authentic with myself. Everything happens internally before it happens externally. But I decided I was going to be honest and authentic. And I decided I was going to be accountable and responsible. I decided I was going to use forgiveness and understand forgiveness as something that can happen for me. And then I decided I was going to grow into a being of love. I was going to do everything with love. And it was through those things that I now understood who I was and what I stood for. So everything that happened in the past, I just let it go because it brought me to this moment of understanding. So if you're feeling these things from your past, ask yourself who you are today. It's a wonderful question to ask, and it's even more of a wonderful adventure to find out who that person is because you're totally in control of it. And it's a magical thing when you take back the power in your own life. That's what I did. I just no longer was giving my power away to somebody else. I'd understood who I was and what I stood for. I mean, now I had to unlearn 23 years of bad psychological behaviors, but I was okay with that because the foundation that I had laid out for myself meant that I was going to be honest, authentic. I was going to become accountable and responsible. I was going to forgive, and I was going to be love. So whatever that meant along my journey moving forward, I was going to learn through those avenues. I wasn't going to play the victim or lay blame anymore. And when something came up that didn't align with the philosophies that I had laid out for my foundation, I was going to speak my truth. And I did that, and I do that. I got out of jail homeless, and I had to go back and live in the drug house because I had nowhere to go. I didn't have any clothes. I had nothing. So I went back there, and the guy that was running this drug house, I walked back in the house, and he said, "Hey, man, you're back, right? Whatever." And he threw me a bag of drugs right away, and he's like, "Here you go, bro. Like, get yourself going again, like, make money, do whatever you got to do, right?" And I looked at the guy, and I threw the bag of drugs back at him. And I mean, we're talking about a hardcore drug house, like prostitution, needles, crack pipes, like cocaine, like methamphetamine. Everything's going on everywhere. A whole house with rooms all over the place with people just drugged out. A lot of emotional traumas happening in this place, but like a lot of anger, frustration, a lot of things going on, right? I threw the bag of drugs back at him, and I said, "Bro, I just need a place to sleep away from the chaos and some clothes." And I didn't even really know this guy. I knew him well enough to know, we used drugs together or whatever, and I could make some money or whatever. And I still remember the way he looked at me. He's like, "You're for real?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm for real. Like, I need this." And he kicked everyone out of a room, and he created a space for me. It was in his room, but he created a space for me. And for 3 days, no one came in that space. He did that for me, which was a gift. I still remember the guy's name. His name was David, and he went by King D, King David. I was reading the Bible in jail, and I read David's story, and I thought it was quite interesting. But I always thought, like, wow, that guy was a gift to me. That was a real gift that happened along my journey. And then from there, I called my mother, and I had the same conversation with her. And I hadn't spoke to her in quite some time. And I told her, "Look, Mom, this is where I am. This is what I'm doing. I've made it. I've made it this far, but I need to get out of here. This isn't good for me, and I can't stay in this situation for much longer." And she had decided she was going to give me a chance. And I mean, this is after, like, they wrote me off for quite some time. But she told me, and I'll never forget that on the phone, she said, "Something's different with you." I was pretty, yeah, that was a pretty magical moment for me. Because I knew that the work that I put in to processing the emotions and the dedication that I had made to being honest and authentic, being accountable and responsible and speaking my truth had paid off. Because I really was being seen now, It wasn't really just bullshit for me, because my whole journey was a lot of bullshit. I lied so much, It doesn't mean I was a bad guy, but like I lied a lot. So for my mother to really, she felt me that day. That's why she agreed to it, is because she could feel something different. That's why that guy moved those people out of that house, because they could feel something different. It's because I put work in. I put a lot of work in. And, people still say to me, man, how'd you go back to the drug house? Like getting fresh out of jail. Well, it's because I had nowhere to go, but it didn't matter to me. You know why? Because I'd made a choice to be somebody different in the present moment. So whatever holds you back in your life, make that choice to be somebody different, because your past doesn't define you. It only helps grow to the person that you choose to be in the moment, because you've decided to detach from the emotions and you decided to learn from it, because that's exactly what I did. I went back into that drug house because I had nowhere to go, but I didn't use the drugs because I had learned from my past. And I'm still able to go down into areas with a lot of addiction like I do. I give back my time so much to addicts because it's something I understand. I never forget where I come from, and I made it out. So because I made it out, I want to take the wisdom that I learned along my journey and share that with other people. That's the beautiful thing about processing emotions and emotional traumas, is that you learn from it. And you'll come across people in your life that are going through the same thing, and you'll be able to step up and say, hey, you know what? Shit, I went through something like that too. And I'm going to share with you how I moved through it. Because that's what we're doing, and that's education. We're just sharing with each other experiences that we had that helped us grow and evolve through things. And if you think 23 years of emotional traumas and bad psychological behaviors is a lot to go through, because a lot of people say, oh, your story's so inspirational. But you know what? You have the same power in you that I have in me. We're not different. I'm not special or unique. I literally just decided I was done reliving moments inside of my mind. I stopped creating hypotheticals and assumptions. I took off the bag of rocks that I'd been carrying around for so long, that were all the emotional traumas, all the baggage I had been carrying around that were just dense energy stuck inside of emotions. I took it off. Because I was alone with myself, and I decided I was going to be somebody different in the present moment. That's all I did. And then I forgave myself. And I forgave everyone else, because I decided to become honest and authentic and accountable and responsible for the things that I had done. It just was so much easier. It was so much easier. And I'll tell you, unprocessed emotions is very difficult. And it comes with so many bad psychological behaviors. It's just a reality. And you know this. If you're listening to this episode as to what to do, believe in yourself. Be somebody different in the present moment. Live in the moment and let go of the past. You will feel so much better. And you know what? You'll start to look better too, because you'll be happy and you won't be carrying around all that baggage. And that's the truth, because how we feel is how we look. You just need to process emotions, because if you saw my prison photo 2.5 years ago, you would never believe the guy that's looking at you right now. And even as I'm looking at the camera for the YouTube channel, I still sometimes, even in the morning, I look at myself and I'm like, man, we made it. We did it. Holy shit. I mean, ask yourself, when's the last time you did that? When's the last time you gave yourself that power back? You looked at yourself in the mirror and you said, you know what? I like the person I am. I love the person I am, because I love myself. That is not weird to do that. And if you haven't done that and it feels weird the first time you do it, it's because you haven't been practicing it. And I would really encourage you to use that along your journey. Looking at yourself in the morning, making that time to look at yourself and tell yourself that you love the person you are, because every single day you wake up, you have the ability to be somebody in the present moment. If you make a choice, stick with it. If you make mistakes along the way, that's okay. Because as long as you learn from them and you apply it to the next experience, you've learned from it. There's no reason to stay bound inside of an emotional repetitive cycle, or build up anxiety, or build up fear, or build up stress around any situation, because you've processed it. The practice of fear, anxiety, and stress is one that we practice. So you can move through that by processing some things in the moment. When something happens, allow the feeling and then look for the lesson and apply it to the next one. Period. Flow through life. with that practice. And anything you practice, you're going to get good at. I promise you that. So this kind of thing, I don't care where you're at in your journey. I was 36 when I first experienced all this for myself. It was 2.5 years ago. And I'll tell you, I practice every day. Life is a practice. But man, when you practice life because you know who you are and what you want, it becomes easy. Like, it's difficult, but it's still easy because it's beautiful, because you love through everything and you understand that things are happening for you and you understand that everything is a lesson and an experience. So when that happens and you're flowing through life, you can look at every single situation, no matter how difficult it is, as something that's happening for you, which is really beautiful, because then as you start to get better at this, you're like, okay, like now I can navigate through life. I can put myself in situations and surround myself with people that are going to support this evolution into love. And it becomes much, much easier because you're highly aware of it and you're so good at speaking your truth and you're conscious of what you want in life. You have the power. You have the power. You have the absolute power to do whatever you want to do. Don't ever forget that. And you have the power to make those choices in your life. And the choices that we make all have consequences. So if you're doing good things for yourself, you're going to get good results. And that's a fact. If you're taking in poison, if you're taking in shitty television and taking in too much social media, it's not going to be good for your evolution. Those are all things you can control, but you've got to practice discipline. Discipline yourself. It's a wonderful thing to do that. It's not easy because you've practiced doing things that are so easy for you. They aren't good for your evolution, but they're easy for you to do. But you can unlearn them because you have that power. Just believe in yourself, man. Please, I'm proof. I'm proof of what happens when you believe in yourself. And I want that for all of you. I really do. I want you to see and feel the power that I have within me, because you have it within you too. I just woke something up. I just decided I was going to love myself, and I wasn't going to stay bound within emotions. No more. I was going to allow emotions to happen in the moment, but no way was I going to relive that over and over and over. It didn't serve me no purpose. And I can tell you today, love is an emotion, absolutely, but it's more of an understanding. And when you have the understanding of love, you want to share that with every ounce of your being because you understand it. And it's so infectious and it's so beautiful. And this is what we are growing into. You are becoming love. And I encourage you to practice that every single day. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it because I appreciate you for appreciating yourself and wanting something different and allowing these words to absorb into your body and to feel that and to be that. You know what I'm saying? I really appreciate you for that. Next week, we're going to talk about self-care. And I have come to understand self-care as being the protection of self-love. So they're one and the same, and they go together, and it's a beautiful relationship. So we're going to get there. But this week, practice. Open Pandora's box within you. Allow all the shit from your past to come out. Look at it. Feel it. Allow it. And then let it go. Once and for all. And move on. I'll see you here next week. My social media is Real Talk for an Unreal World. That's the Instagram, the Facebook, the YouTube, which I do make a video for. So I don't know why you'd want to see me, but if you want to see me, you can check that on the YouTube. My Twitter is Insta, 4 Unreal. And my email, which is very important, is realtalkforanunrealworld@gmail.com. Please, if you're on this evolution and you have questions or you want to have a conversation or whatever, maybe anything I can help. If you just got questions about jobs, relationships, anything, man, I offer perspective for everything. That's what I'm here to do, and that's what I love to do because that's what love is. We share time, we share information with each other. Please feel free to email me. And if you know anyone who could benefit from these conversations that we're having here or this thing that I'm trying to grow, please share this information with them. I would really encourage that, and I would really appreciate it just because I want as many people to come into the light as humanly possible. That's what being a light worker is, and I can't do it alone. I need your help. So Much appreciated. Much love. People, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to this. Just really, it's cool, man. Come a long way. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.